I wish I had kind of a time machine to see how quickly it would have grown. Because I think I would have spent even more time focusing on the drone side, even though we did spend a lot of time focusing on it. But yeah, if somebody had told me that we would have drones that can do what they do today in 8 years, 10 years, it's incredible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast, where we talk about all things drones and how they're being used in the Caribbean. Now, my guest today is a veteran aviation professional, a certified flight instructor, commercial pilot, and the co-founder of one of the largest online training institutions in the world. He is the man responsible for helping hundreds of thousands of students earn their wings, both manned and unmanned. Please enjoy my episode with Mr. Greg Reverdiau of Pilot Institute. Hi, Greg. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Actually glad to have you. I've been wanting to have this conversation for quite some time now. So, Greg, for the persons that may not be familiar with you, could you introduce yourself to the audience for me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm Greg Reverdiau. I'm the co-founder of Pilot Institute. We provide online training for pilots, all sorts of pilots. So airplane pilots, drone pilots, soon helicopter pilots. We're finishing a course for that. We also have dispatch training. So we provide training for FAA dispatchers, which is an unknown kind of certification that you can get to fly for the airlines and to work for the airlines, I should say. We have flight attendant training. So we provide all sorts of things in the aviation world, mostly online, but we also have in-person classes since we moved to a new facility. We've trained almost 500,000 people now. Wow. 460,000 last I checked, from all over the world. And we have about 60, 70 different courses on our platform on a variety of topics, whether they're paid courses or also free content. We have YouTube channels and that where we spend, a lot of time creating content. Our job is to educate pilots all over the world to make sure that they're flying safely and not hurting themselves and hurting others.
Okay. So, Greg, you started as an airline, as a manned aviation. What made you make not the switch? What made you add drones to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I started as a commercial pilot. I wanted to actually be an airline pilot. Unfortunately, I graduated right around 9/11. I graduated a year after I finished my training a year after 9/11 happened. So it was pretty difficult to find jobs and to get to do anything in aviation. So I decided to stay in aviation. I did some management jobs for a long time. And by the time I was ready to move to the airlines, I was kind of enjoying what I was doing in the management world. So I managed flight schools for a long time. And then I moved from a pretty large flight school, a collegiate flight training environment, to a small flight school that I manage here in Arizona, where I live now. And I realized that, the training that our students were getting from online classes wasn't the greatest. So I thought that I could do a better job. And so I started doing private pilot class. And then right around that time, the drone thing kind of piqued my interest. This is a new technology. I like technology in general. And then we found that the training was pretty close to what the airplane training we were providing was. And so decided to create a course for Part 107 training that was based on what I had learned as a manned aircraft pilot for many, many years. And ended up creating that course, became very popular, and then decided to kind of start the company and sell the course by myself with my business partner. At first, I was selling it through different platforms, and It wasn't working. Well, it was working okay, but the platforms were taking a lot of money off of what they were selling. And so we thought we could do it better ourselves. And that's kind of how everything started. But drones have always been really interesting to me. It's a technology that changed tremendously over the last 7-8 years. And it's still changing to this day.
Is the approach that you have to take when teaching to drone pilots different than the approach for manned aircraft operators?
I try to have the same approach, because to me, they're both airspace users. They're going to share the airspace with each other. And so we try, when you create drone pilots, we try to create aviators. I like that term because to me, it's a term that explains exactly, it's more than just being a pilot. It's sharing the airspace with other people, and it's acting like somebody who's sharing the airspace. And so, yeah, I try not to make too much of a difference between the two. And so we do pretty in-depth training in general, even for drone pilots, because there are things that I believe they need to know, and they need to understand how other people are operating in the airspace, not just them. And so, yeah, we try to be quite in depth.
So you mentioned that, you graduated or finished your commercial airline training just after 9/11. Are there any comparisons between the regulatory changes that would have happened then and what you see taking place in the drone space now?
Oh, interesting. A lot of things changed after 9/11. Everything became more stringent, whether it was the rules for training pilots in general, having the TSA involved in everything that we did. Yep. I don't see as much of that in the drone side, except for the new proposed Part 108. They introduce a lot of TSA stuff that is very reminiscent of what we saw on the airplane, over 20 years ago now. And but yeah, it's always something to keep in mind. Obviously, drones can also be used for bad things, just like airplanes were used back then for bad things. So we have to keep in mind, who's flying these things, especially when they have the ability to fly beyond visual line of sight with a large drone that can carry a big package. These are things that should be worrisome and that we need to be careful with.
You guys offer free courses and paid courses, but how do you choose? Because everybody loves free stuff, but this is a business for you guys at the end of the day. How do you choose what you give away for free and what you charge for?
Yeah, it's typically the amount of data that we provide and the amount of value that we provide. Not that the free courses are not valuable, but to me, we offer a lot of free courses for people that are beginning to fly drones, because that information should be available for free. Everybody should be able to fly recreationally and learning all these things without having to pay anything. This is how we get people interested into this. And of course, we always hope that people eventually will convert and purchase a paid course. But even if they don't, at least we did something good for the industry, because at the end of the day, if somebody does something dumb with their drone, on purpose or not, but especially not on purpose, somebody flies on the final of an airport and then hits an aircraft, and they didn't know that there was an airport right here because nobody ever told them that they need to look for airports. It's an honest mistake in a way. But if we had a chance to educate these folks in the first place and they don't do that, then everybody wins. And so why not provide this training? Everything else pays the bills, and we're not greedy. This is obviously, we have bills to pay and everything, and we have employees. But at the end of the day, if we make enough money to be able to provide these services for free as well, then why not? Let's just do it. So we always look at, hey, is this going to help somebody who's brand new? And if it does, then typically we're just going to provide it for free. Yeah. We have deep dive courses. We want people to be able to enjoy their drones, because if they go and fly the drone the first time and they don't know anything about it and they crash it, then chances are they're not going to come back, and they're never going to be a potential customer for us, and we're going to lose somebody to the industry completely. So it's kind of a mix of these two things, trying to make sure people can get access to that data for free.
And on that note, talking about knowing where to fly and people knowing what's around them, I am supposed to be in the States next week. So we're filming this in October. Elevate UAV is next week in Miami, and it'll be the first time that I'm flying in the States outside for training. So I have my 107, and I am flying at the event, so it could fall on the commercial. But I downloaded the Aloft app, which I know you guys are a huge part of, and I just want to say thank you for that, because that is so helpful in finding no-fly zones, TFRs, where needs land authorization. So anybody who has to fly in the States, go and get it. And I wish we had something like that. Sidetrack, how would it be possible to get something like that for the Caribbean region?
So the way that it works right now, obviously the US government is very involved because they're providing the data to Aloft and to other providers as well that are doing the same thing. But that data is centralized with the US government, and they're providing that data, keeping it updated, and then those providers, they're the ones that basically spend the money in the software development to make it available. Now, you might say, how do they make it available for free? Well, they have additional things, just like us. They provide the basic function for free. And then if you want more, then you can upgrade. So if you're a commercial operator, then you can upgrade to the commercial access and be able to track your resources and to be able to add more people to the list. And so they add more services on top of it that would be of value that you would pay for. So in your case, I think you would need to find a company that would be willing to kind of spend the money on developing something like this. But of course, there's a regulatory requirement in the United States that says you have to get airspace approval before you can fly. So they already have the demand kind of dictated by the government for what they're doing. It would have to be that, the Caribbean, one of the governments there or all of them agree that this is something that they need to do. And then a service would kind of pop out of all of that.
Yeah, I think that's something that, it may take some work because we have all the different civil aviations, which is the FAA equivalent throughout all the islands, but I don't see it being impossible because something like that, a centralized place where you could just not just see the airspace, but also request approvals as well, could be very useful and should streamline the entire process. Because as it is right now, we do need approvals for commercial operation. It's just, you send an email, you have to wait a couple of days. It's just a whole long process.
I would say I would approach a government then if you're, if you know somebody who can code apps, and then approach the government and basically say, hey, we have a solution here. Is this something that can be approved to submit a request instead of doing it by hand or doing it on the website or, do the cumbersome way that whatever it is right now. I would approach the government. It's probably a little bit easier in your case, I think, with a smaller government to be able to do this if you have the right contacts.
Well, you'd be surprised how much it isn't easier.
Well, yeah, I've dealt with some not in the Caribbean, but I've dealt with governments in Central America, and I can understand that. They were smaller, but it was definitely more painful.
Yeah, they sometimes take things just, you would hope it is easier because it's smaller, but no. Sorry. So going back to Pilot Institute and in particular, what was your biggest course? Is it the 107 course?
Yeah, 107 and private pilot are pretty close to each other as far as enrollment and revenue. Yeah.
Okay. So I know you guys have a 99% success rate at your 107 course, and I believe you have a money back guarantee as well, right?
Yeah.
What's responsible for that level of confidence that, hey, you guys come and do this? And 99% success rate, you can't really argue it. What do you credit that to?
Yeah, it's actually 99.99%.
Damn right.
So if it was 99%, we would be losing a lot of money actually, because we've trained we've trained of all the FAA tests, we've trained like roughly almost 300,000 people to take an FAA test. And that's a 99.9% pass rate on that, even 99.99% pass rate. So the reason behind the confidence, quite frankly, is that over the few years that I did this on my own before we started the company, I knew that the results were good. I knew that people were passing, and primarily it's because I go in depth into all these details that people need to know. But I think also it's paying extra attention to all the topics that are required to be taught. So a lot of people don't know this, but the FAA has this beautiful document called the Airman Certification Standard, and in the ACS for short, there's a list of every single topic that are going to be covered on the exam. It's a cheat sheet. It's telling you, we're going to test you on this, this, and this, and this. And there's quite a few of them. If you look at the private pilot, it's like 600 items. If you look at the Part 107, I don't remember how many it is, but it's a few hundred of these topics. And so when I create my course, I look at this ACS as the Bible, and I make sure that, yes, this is covered here, this is covered here, this is covered. So I cover every topic. And I don't even care about the type of questions that the FAA is going to ask. I want you to know the topic. If you know that topic, you can answer any questions. People always tell us, and I tell people, I said, hey, listen, when you take the course, we're going to give you a quiz, but that quiz is not going to be the exact question you're going to see on the exam. As a matter of fact, I don't even care if I have the exact same question that's going to be on the exam, because I'm going to give you the knowledge and you can answer any question that the FAA is going to throw at you. And this is what happens. Over time, the FAA changes stuff. So people that are out there that are teaching to a question bank, they typically fail because over time the FAA changes those topics and then people memorize questions and then they go to the exam and, oh, I've never seen that question.
Yeah.
Well, with our approach, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the FAA throws at you. Okay. We have people getting perfect scores on a regular basis because of that, because they just know the topic. So I think the confidence comes from that. And for me, offering the refund, we actually refund and we pay for the retest if you fail.
Oh, wow.
And that's a no-brainer because we know it works.
Okay.
Before we continue, special announcement. We have just launched the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast Drone Pilot Checklist. So whether you are a hobbyist or a commercial operator, this checklist will make sure that you have everything in order before you take off for your next flight. Now, to get the checklist, there's a link in the description, and you sign up and you will receive it in your email. Now, we are also announcing that we'll be launching the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast newsletter in a couple of weeks. So that's coming soon. And once you sign up to receive the checklist, you'll automatically be added to the newsletter listing. Or if you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can head over to the website, pilotsofthecaribbeanpod.com, and there's a form on the homepage where you could submit your name and your email address, and you'll be added to the newsletter list. And I guarantee you, you're not going to want to miss out on that because we have some really good stuff coming at you. So checklist, link in the description. If you just want to sign up for the newsletter, head over to the website and sign up now. Now back to it.
Cool. What is your response to people that say, the Part 107, having a Part 107, yes, you're qualified to fly, but doesn't mean you can fly because there is no practical aspect of it. How do you address that?
I have to agree with that. Yeah. I think it's a license to be dangerous. That's what I call it, right? It's the beginning of your journey as a commercial pilot. You should absolutely spend more time getting comfortable with drones. Now, the good news is a lot of drones are fairly easy to fly. You just need to do it in a controlled environment at first. You need to get comfortable with them. And then over time, you'll be able to get, that knowledge. If I put you in an airplane today and I say, hey, you figure this out on your own and you go fly, you can't really do that. But if I put you in at the command of a DJI Air 3S, you should be able to figure it out pretty quickly with some tutorials. And so I think the demand for, in-person training, one-on-one for basic is just not necessary for everyone. Some people need it, absolutely, but the majority of folks that are pretty comfortable with PlayStation flight control, PlayStation controls, they should be able to pick it up quickly. But I think that's the reason also why there's not a required flight test at the moment with Part 107. It's been working pretty well without a flight test, and I think it's hard to argue against this. People are not crashing because they don't know how to fly the drone. People are crashing because they're not aware of the rules and they're flying in places where they're not supposed to, and crashing into manned aircraft, and that's a bigger issue for sure.
Is that something you'd want to see changed, like a practical aspect?
Yeah. To a certain extent. So, for example, on more complex platforms like flying a large aircraft over 55 pounds, yes, I would like to see some sort of in-person training that shows this. For flying beyond visual line of sight, potentially, in some cases where you're going to be operating in more complex areas, I would love to see more in-person training. But what I really would like to see is for companies themselves that are hiring people that have a requirement that you've been trained, and that it doesn't necessarily come from the FAA, because the average person that's going to be flying on their own, they probably don't require that flight training. But if you start operating for a multi-million-dollar company, I think it should come from that company and say, yes, we're going to require you to do this training. We're going to create our own training program, and then you have to go to Pilot Institute to get this checked off and make sure that you've received the training properly, and then you can come to us and then we'll do the rest. So that, to me, industry-based type of training requirement in person, I think would be nice. But as far as the 107 in itself, there are so many people using it that don't necessarily require that training.
Do do you see, or I don't know how familiar you are with other, guidelines or policies across the world, but do you see anything else that you think should be added to 107, 107?
Yeah, I would love to see different levels based on risk. And that's kind of what I just said, depending on who you're going to be flying for, or where you're going to be flying, the type of aircraft you're going to be flying, a risk-based approach for deciding if you need additional training. This is kind of what Canada has been doing, right? They said you have a basic license and you have an advanced license. So if you're doing something more complex that's going to require flying closer to people, then you need to have a bit more training, including in-person training. But if you're just doing basic stuff and you're away from folks, then it doesn't really hurt anyone if your drone kind of goes down, if that makes any sense. So I like that risk-based approach rather than, it never made sense to me, for example, that we have a recreational exemption and then a Part 107 and then a non-recreational rule, because at the end of the day, the risk level is kind of the same. If you're going to be flying that drone in the same area, why is it less restrictive for someone who's a recreational user than it would be for someone who's potentially a professional at this? Yeah. So we're putting more restrictions on somebody who's a professional than we do on somebody who's recreational, but they can do the same type of activity with less restriction. So it's that never really made too much sense to me. I'd rather see a risk-based approach rather than a type of activity approach.
So speaking of increasing risk, I believe the submission deadline passed for Part 108. And so for those who may not be familiar listening to this, could you break down for me the TLDR on what Part 108 is, well, proposed rule for Part 108 is, and what are some of the more challenging aspects or parts of it that you had a challenge with that you think should be relooked?
Yeah, absolutely. So Part 108 is what the FAA is calling the beyond visual line of sight, a way to normalize beyond visual line of sight flying. So at the moment, under Part 107, you can only fly your drone within visual line of sight, recreationally as well. And this is obviously a big limitations for people that want to fly beyond visual line of sight. And there's a lot of different applications for this. So the FAA is proposing this new set of rules called Part 108, which would be kind of highlighting how to operate beyond visual line of sight. The biggest issue that I see with this at the moment is that it's for fully autonomous drones and fully autonomous operations, which you and I know is just a small, very, very, very small portion of the activities that are happening in the sky right now. Now, in the future, this may be different. In 5 to 10 years, there may be more fully autonomous operations than non-autonomous. But in the meantime, there's not really, or at least in the proposal, there's not a pathway to fly beyond visual line of sight with a manual control. The FAA specifically said, we don't want a pilot. We only want to have a supervisor of this flight that's going to be flying autonomously. And that person only is going to have a few buttons that they can push to manipulate the aircraft. Right. And even then, it's just going to be to give it command to land or to go somewhere else, not really to take full control. And so that was, I think, my biggest issue. And I'm not the only one, obviously. A lot of folks in the industry have talked about this, but I would like to see a pathway to fly beyond visual line of sight non-autonomously under Part 108 rule. So that was a big part of our proposal, was how to do this. There are some other details with population densities that the FAA, I think, made more complicated than it needed to be. And the fact that they're not going to require any sort of certification for people that are going to be flying beyond visual line of sight, that was a big issue for me as a man aircraft pilot and a flight instructor. I like certification because there's a standard that needs to be met before you're found to be proficient. And it's very well caged in a way. I know what I need to teach. If I teach you to these standards and you go take the test, then you're going to pass and then you'll be proficient. That's kind of out of the window right now with Part 108. So I don't really care for that too much.
Do you see a world where, they may look at it and say, well, okay, you as a commercial operator, specifically for beyond visual line of sight, over a certain weight, you should be required to hold both Part 61 and 107 to qualify for 108?
This is kind of how it is right now for large aircraft. So if you want to fly a large drone over 55 pounds, you kind of have to do that. I don't see that as a pathway going forward because of what they've proposed right now. What I would like to see is that we use Part 107 as a basis certificate and that we add a rating on top of it. You know how right now you can become a private pilot and then you can add an instrument rating or you can add a multi-engine rating onto your certificate. I would like to see Part 107 being a base certificate, and we add a beyond visual line of sight rating on top of it. We add a large UAS rating on top of it. So now you can say, hey, I've trained on these large aircraft. I know how to fly something that's 110 pounds. That's added to my certificate. Just like right now, if I want to fly a jet and it's got a turbine and it's over 12,500 pounds, and I'm going to get a type rating, and it gets added to my type rating. So that's what I would like to see, added going forward.
What's the timeline for the feedback? So everyone has submitted their comments, and feedback is due in, was it February, I believe?
So we're in the NPRM, it says 9 months from August when it was proposed. So that would take us to, I think, April of next year is when we're supposed to see the final ruling. I'm expecting it's going to take maybe a little bit longer than that. I hope actually it takes a little bit longer than that because it means that they've worked on it and they've made changes, enough changes that it's acceptable. We don't have another shot at this, unfortunately. We requested that there's another NPRM period. It's not going to happen. We also requested that the FAA has more meetings with the industry to get more feedback on what they're working on. I hope that happens because that's definitely a possibility. But yeah, I think April, to me, I think August of next year is probably when we're going to see something, but it's a shot in the air. Who knows? It's hard to tell.
Yeah. And then that is the final ruling. And then you have to, whatever the timeline is for implementation. So that could be another year or two before anything gets actually implemented.
Yeah, it could be less. It could be 3 months. It could be 6 or 9 months. Those are pretty standard formats. It depends on how complex it is, and also depends on how much time they need to implement everything around the rule. So, for example, in Part 108 right now, they're proposing to have they call service providers, automatic data service provider, ADSPs. And this would take time to put in place. Probably by the time they submit application and they review the application, they approve these folks, that probably would take 9 months to a year to happen. But with our proposal, for example, we said we can use Part 107 as a basis. All we need to do is implement an ACS and then be able to have a test available at PSI, and then people can go and take it, and then you get issued a certificate. So that could be done in 3 months, really. So it depends on which pathway they're going to follow, and how much time they're going to give to the industry to put in place.
So do you think the U.S. industry is ready for it right now? And the reason I ask you that is, walking around the floor at commercial UAV, for almost a year now, I had been hearing and reading about the rumors of Part 108 coming soon. Nobody had an exact timeline, but it was coming. And it seemed like, a lot of manufacturers, both in the US and, the ones from outside, there was some, I think it was Taiwanese, I saw some Japanese as well. It seems like everybody is or has been preparing for it, but maybe not as how it actually came out in terms of not actually having a lot of control. So do you think the US market is ready for it right now?
No, I don't think so. Because like you said, I think there were a lot of requirements that people were not expecting. One of them is the C2 controller, the C2 link between the controller and the aircraft. These would require to have different frequencies if you're operating over a certain type of population density. And none of the manufacturers are ready for this at the moment. I mean, they might be ready to put a chip in there, but now they have to get that frequency approved by the FAA and by the FCC. And now they have to submit this aircraft to be approved via an airworthiness acceptance. That's what they call it. That's what the FAA calls it. And so they're going to have to do paperwork. They're going to have to get a means of compliance approved. They're going to have to get a declaration of compliance from the FAA. All this stuff is going to take a lot of time from the manufacturer. So just on the aircraft manufacturing side of things, I don't think really anybody is a year ready, within a year, potentially.
Yeah.
And then we have the ADSPs on top of it that need to be put in place. And that could be a year, maybe 2 years for that to happen. So yeah, there are quite a few things that have a longer period before this can be put in place. It's not going to turn on in August if that's when it comes out of next year.
And you're mentioning is that like aircraft? Is that like type certification?
Less complicated than type certification, but same idea. So they made it's a type certification light, if you want to think about it this way.
Okay.
They're looking at it to make it not as complicated as an airworthiness certificate, which is what you would get technically for a manned aircraft under Part 21. They're making this so it's less cumbersome, but it still is a lot of paperwork. And we talked to a bunch of manufacturers, and they said, hey, we're a small manufacturer. We don't have the bandwidth to create all of this paperwork to make it happen. So regardless even of the hardware, if they have the hardware available, obviously you're going to need detect and avoid technology, which is, somewhat, it's available, but it's not mainstream just yet, and it's not perfect. So all of these things, they're going to have to be figured out to meet the regulatory requirement. And of course, we don't know what those regulatory requirements. We can guess based on what the proposal was, but we don't know what the final thing is going to be.
Yeah. And I think one of my other takeaways from it was that there's a lot less operator responsibility in terms of certification and actual qualification at the FAA level, and more manufacturer responsibility.
Yeah, well, operator and manufacturer. So not the FAA nearly as much involved. They want to put the liability on the operator and on the person that owns the program, basically.
Okay, so interesting times ahead. Speaking of, the responsibility and what you guys are going through in the States, December 23rd? Yeah, I believe it's the 23rd.
23rd.
Yeah, that's another important date. Where do you stand on the upcoming potential DJI ban?
My stance is pretty straightforward. If DJI is a threat to national security, I want to see proof of it. I want to see proof from the US government that we should not be trusting DJI. In the meantime, I'm a big believer in innocent until proven guilty. Right. And at the moment, I have a hard time seeing DJI as being guilty until we see more proof. So the audit is something that we've been asking for. We want to see the audit, whether it's good or bad. If the results are bad, then we will say, okay, DJI is bad and it should be banned. If the audit doesn't come around, then there's always going to be a doubt. And if the audit doesn't come around and we say that DJI is guilty, then I think something is flawed. We cannot, it's like me coming to you and arresting you and telling you, hey, I'm arresting you because I think you did this. And then I'm going to put you in jail until December 23rd. And if on the December 23rd, we can't get to your trial, then you're going to be guilty. How do you feel about that? Yeah. That's exactly what we're telling DJI right now, is that we're coming up with your trial. And if we can't get to it, then you know what? By December 23rd, you're out, even if we don't have any proof to the public that you did something wrong. So I think that it's flawed. It's flawed in so many ways, because who's next? What's the next company that's going to be in the target because they're competitive, which I believe is what this is right now. DJI is a competitive company. They create great products and they're affordable, and that's a threat to many in the business. And so I want to see proof. I want to see the data, and then from there we can continue either using DJI or we can stop using DJI. But without it, I think it's never going to be a clean conclusion.
Yeah, and the trickle down effects to that as well. Because here in the Caribbean, I would say safely 95% of the drones we use are DJI, and we get them, majority of them, from the States. Now we do have other options, but those other options maybe make them even more cost prohibitive. So not having access to them directly from the States, it's not just you guys, but us here in the Caribbean as well. I mean, we could probably figure ways out, but it just makes it a lot more difficult and potentially a lot more expensive. So
yeah, the repercussions are heavy on this because you have, hundreds of thousands of people. At the moment, there's almost 500,000 certified Part 107 pilots in the United States. I think it's 460 some thousand at the moment.
okay.
The vast majority of these, from the data that we've seen, the unofficial data, everybody always says 70% of the market is DJI. From the data that we've seen from remote ID trackers, for example, it's closer to 92 to 98% of the folks that are flying right now. All over the US are flying a DJI drone. So you're taking down 92 to 97%, including public safety agencies, but also a ton of small businesses that are relying on this great tool to make a living. The problem is, if there were replacements that were more expensive, I would say, well, it sucks. It's going to get more expensive, but at least we have an option.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. At the moment, I as much as I want to see American manufacturers succeeding in providing these drones, nobody is interested in providing a consumer drone that is going to compete with the Mavic and the Air and the Mini. And the problem is that these are the popular platforms. We do have other options, bigger aircraft that are $40,000, but that are not going to be doing the job that we need to do for somebody who's doing roof inspections, for somebody who's doing real estate photography. These drones don't exist. There's no replacement. It's not like there is an expensive replacement. There is no replacement. And this is something we've been very vocal about. You're taking away the entire tool. You're not just replacing it with something expensive. You're just taking it away completely. And people might say, people that are anti-DJI might say, well, it's going to be good because somebody's going to step in and do it. Well, if they haven't done it by now, we have had essentially a full blockage of DJI drones at the border for the last year. By CBP. Nobody has stepped up to the plate to make it happen. And even if they could, you have companies like Skydio, which, is the largest American manufacturer of drones in the United States at the moment. They make 10,000 drones a year. Okay?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't work. Actually, I just said something wrong. It make 10,000 drones a month. Okay, 10,000 drones a month. That's 100,000 a year. That's less people that are getting trained with. That's about the same amount of people that are getting trained in Part 107 every year. And that doesn't include all the folks that we have out there. So we don't have the capability to take over the demand that DJI is providing. Are we going to have it in 4 years and 5 years? Maybe in 4 years and 5 years. But in the meantime, in the next 4 years and 5 years, we don't have the ability to produce that internally and take care of the demand. And so what are folks going to do?
Yeah.
It's just not going to work. It doesn't add up. The math doesn't add up. So that's why I'm obviously very vocal about this in everything that we do, but we have to provide options for people. Otherwise, we're going to kill this industry.
Look into your crystal ball and give me some hope, Greg. What happens in December?
There's several things that can happen, okay? The one thing that I think everybody is expecting to happen is that the audit doesn't happen and DJI gets added to the FCC list, which means that they're no longer able to have new models of drones approved going forward. That's one of the scenarios, probably one of the highest on my list at the moment. In the meantime, what I think happens is that DJI continues to create drones with using brands called XYZ company that basically sells a DJI drone that's not marked as DJI, and we continue getting these drones. It's happened already. I think the US government is going to keep fighting against that method, using the FCC and using anybody else that they can. The other option is that at the last minute, we have a TikTok type situation where TikTok was going to get banned. They shut down, and then a day later, they made a big donation, and then all of a sudden, they're no longer banned, and it's still technically in the books, but it's not being enforced. That's another option. I don't know how viable that is, but it's a possibility if there's enough outcry from the general population and from public safety agencies. Another option, which is kind of nuclear, which is where the FCC puts DJI on the entity list, as it's called, but they also remove approval from existing drones, or they prohibit the sale of DJI drones completely, even current models in the United States. This would hurt, obviously, but is it going to hurt any more than what we have now, where the CBP is blocking every package anyway? Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it makes that big of a difference. And the other option is that the FCC decides to remove approval of current FCC approved drones and make those illegal to fly because the approval is gone. I have a hard time with that one because it means that they have to enforce it. I don't know if they have the staff to enforce it, which means that people would still continue flying these drones and nobody would be able to tell them that they can't. So I don't know. These are all obviously things that could happen. Yeah. The likelihood are more or less depending on what goes on. Another thing is that the audit happens. That's another option, obviously. Right. I think it's too late now, unless somebody has been doing it and we don't know about it. But we have enough industry folks that we know that we would have known by now that somebody had started it. But if they did, and then if that happens, then we have two options. Either DJI is found to be guilty or DJI is found to not be guilty. In which case, that's a big Hail Mary, right? Comes December, early December, we have the results of the audit and DJI is cleaned of any wrongdoing. And then what? Then we still have the CBP lock, I guess. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. Obviously, it's hard to predict, but my money would be on no audit happens, DJI gets added to the FCC, and they continue to sell drones using a variety of brands of all sorts.
But I saw on that one, I think it was Drone DJ put out something that the FCC was supposed to vote, I believe it was on the 28th, to enact some sort of ban that would restrict that from happening.
Yes. Yeah, they're talking about it. So we'll have to see. I haven't read the full text to see how deep it goes. I'm always leery of headlines, and I want to see the full text, the actual text, not just an article, because there's been a couple articles recently that said, well, the FCC is doing this. Could this affect DJI? Well, they're doing this to Huawei, which has been, in the on the radar of the U.S. government for a long time, for actually valid reason. They were found to do something illegal, and so the FCC is removing approval from current devices that have been approved. And so people are saying, well, could this happen to DJI? Well, it could happen. But again, it's a very different situation here because we're talking about a company that has been found guilty compared to a company that has not. So, but it's 2025 and who the hell knows what can happen. It's been a wild world, for a while.
It definitely has, man. And they need to hurry up and get this sorted out so that we don't have this anxiety about, okay, so where do we get new models from? How do we get them,
Yep.
Okay. Positive thoughts. So the Caribbean has a lot of, well, what would be considered against, standards by the states, smaller DSPs. And we don't have places that we could get formalized training per se. I had a conversation with another operator on another island, and he said that, you basically have to be, you guys take the approach of, well, a lot of operators in the States take the approach of, find an industry and specialize in it and become, the master of that industry and offer services beyond what people could offer. And this industry. But here is the complete opposite, where you have to be jack of all trades because we don't have the amount of business that may be large enough to support you if that's all that you do. What sort of training that you think we can access so that, could become that well-rounded sort of service provider?
I think there's a lot of the training that happens in the United States, beyond Part 107, because that's so specific to a specific regulation. Beyond that, flying a drone is the same in every country, just like flying an airplane is the same really in every country. So we have different airspace, yes, we have different regulation, yes, but at the end of the day, it all kind of looks somewhat the same. So flying a DJI drone is the same type of control. Capturing data with a thermal camera is the same. Capturing data with an RGB camera is the same. Doing roof inspection is really the the same. You might be looking for different things because you have different weather, different type of roofs, but at the end of the day, the collection of data is the same. Mapping is the same as well. So I would say spend as much time as you can learning from, what we offer in the United States as far as training, and then develop all these skills. There's nothing wrong with being a jack of all trade, like you said, because that's going to be your job. You're going to have to go all over the place and do all these different tasks. And then eventually you might find yourself having to specialize because you have enough business of doing this one thing. But at first, I think everybody starts by doing that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay. And for that person in that position, what would be the most significant non-flying skill that you think every DSP should master?
Yep, data analysis by all means. You have to know. The drone is a way to capture data. It's a tool to capture data. That's really all that it is. So that portion of it is not overly complicated. I would say for mapping, it is a little bit more complex because you have to make sure you do it the right way, that you understand your shutter speed, that you understand your overlap, that you understand, where you put your ground control point and all of that. There's a technique to it. But at the end of the day, that data, you need to do something with it because that product is what you're going to provide to your customer. And so how do you analyze the data? How do you analyze the thermal data? Did what you see on the thermal image, is it because of reflection or is it because of an actual temperature change? We see this a lot with reflective surfaces, for example. Oh, I see that it's hot. No, actually it was just reflective. So the sensor did not capture the data correctly. Or when you do your mapping, how are you going to stitch all these images together and provide that data? Or if you're doing volumetric measurements at a mine, okay, how do you capture that data and how do you know the limitations of the data that you captured? So what is the final product? It's always going to be some sort of report to your customer telling them this is the data that we captured and here's the information. So becoming an expert at data analysis to me is almost more important than the flying skills themselves, because that's where the money is at. Yeah. That's providing that data and analyzing that data is the most important thing.
Is that something that most pilots usually tend to overlook when they get into it?
Yes, because to them it's a shiny thing and it's cool to fly, right? Flying is fun; it's really enjoyable, and you're operating the cool toy. You've got this Matrice 300, and you put a big payload on it, and then you fly it, and you do your mission, and you're like, okay, I'm done. Well, no, you're not done. Now you have to go back and you have to put those thousands of images into the software, and then you have to spit it out, and you have to understand when something goes wrong. Why did it do what it did? Is it because I didn't take that photo correctly? Is it because I had a blurry image because my shutter speed was not set correctly because it was too dark outside, or I didn't expose the image correctly, so now I have wrong data? All these things, you have to understand both sides. The flying side. We have our good friend Jared, who's the one teaching the mapping courses that we have, and he has two teams. He has a team of pilots that fly the drone, and that's all they do. They capture the data, and then they talk to the people that process the data, and then they get feedback from them. And then the people that process the data, every once in a while, he takes them to the field and says, hey, this is what it looks like over there when they capture the data. So when you get the data, you understand. So they have to understand both sides. But he has two different sets of people because it's two different sets of skills of analyzing the data versus capturing it. And you could be doing both. Obviously, a lot of people do that, but I think to me, yes, it's very overlooked because the fun part is really, I think, to be outside and flying. The collection of data is the analyzing is not nearly as much fun for some,
Yeah, nobody looks at the sitting down behind a computer for, hours in some instances and think that's the fun part.
Yep, yeah. Exactly.
What's next for you guys in terms of training? Any new courses on the horizon on the drone side?
Yeah, a ton. We're always looking at what comes next, and we have an amazing team of folks that are specialized in different topics, but we have thermal imaging, thermography as a course coming up in 2026. We have in-person training. So we just moved to a brand new facility in March of this year. So we've been here a little bit now. We finally have classrooms, and we're going to be providing in-person training. So that's coming up in Q2 of 2026. We have to wait for the weather now to to churn, to the winter. We do get snow up here. Even though we live in Arizona, people don't think of Arizona as snow, but we're at 5,000 feet elevation. So we do get snow, and, January and February and March are pretty cold. So we're going to start doing classes in April. We have dispatch training. We just started that. This is a 200-hour training course that's approved by the FAA. We just started providing that training, so it's exciting. Students will be in the office in early January to do their first class in person. It's a hybrid class. It's 6 weeks online and 4 weeks in person.
Okay.
And then we have fly attendant training that's coming around the corner as well. We recorded a couple of classes on that. We have more deep dives around the corner, and then we have some surprises that I can't talk about just yet. And then on the airplane side, we have a couple of things that we're doing as well. We're redoing a private pilot course, which was shot about 5 years ago. We've learned a lot of things in the last, actually more than that, it's been shot 6 years ago. We've learned a lot of things in the last 6 years that we can do the course a lot better. So we started recording some chapters, but it's a 35-hour course. So it's a beast. It's 570 lectures and videos, I think. So it takes a lot of time to re-record and re-edit everything. But the chapters that we've done are getting really good feedback. So we're going to slowly re-record some of the older courses. Part 107 is going to be next as well. The courses are up to date. They're not out of date by any means, but now that we have this new standard, it's hard to look at them and not want to do it better. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay.
But so we're busy. We've got a ton of things. The YouTube channels are growing as well. We're creating a lot of content for YouTube, and it's exciting.
Nice one. Looking forward to all the new stuff, and I've been enjoying your stuff as well. I actually did not do my part 107 with you guys because I did not know you existed at the time. That was back in 2019. But I have recommended you guys to everyone that I know that has done it since. And yes, I believe everybody has passed. Anything in the, I know that I have to let you go in a little bit, but anything that you're looking forward to in the drone space in terms of advancements in the technology?
Yeah, I think Part 108, as much as we've criticized it, I think you can criticize in a positive way. We've given a lot of feedback to the FAA. I can't wait to see what it looks like. I think it's going to create good opportunities for pilots. I'm still looking for a resolve on this DJI thing. As negative as it might end up being, I think having a final, not having this thing hanging over our head anymore, and being able to find solutions moving forward. So I'll be happy when this is done, I think in December, if we can close it up. And then I think in general, just drones, seeing cool new drones, cool new tech. Every month I hear somebody else using a drone in a different way. We go to trade shows and we talk to people, and they said, I have a great example. A guy came to me at Commercial UAV, and he said, we're using the drone to clean solar panels. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I said, how are you using the drone to do that? He said, well, actually, we're using the drone. It's a heavy lift drone that we're using to carry the machine that's going to be cleaning the panels to the drone site. And so he says, we do this on top of very tall buildings. And he said, it would be very difficult to carry this heavy machine. I think the machine itself is like 100 pounds. And he said it would be very difficult to carry that machine. So his job is to use a robot to clean solar panels. It's not a drone, but he uses the drone to carry the robot to the machine. And to me, it blew my mind, because now you're using this as a transportation device. I would have thought, you're using like a hose that you're putting onto the drone, and then the drone is cleaning. No, he's using a whole robot that just does that, and he carries it from site to site because it's so heavy. So it was cool. It was just thinking outside the box. I had never heard that. And I love it. I love to hear these stories. I always hear somebody else, and I said, you're going to succeed because you're thinking outside the box and you're solving something with a drone that nobody else has thought about. So it's cool.
Yeah, that was a very interesting one. I think does he have a video of that online?
I don't know, actually. He was kind of exploring, how to do this beyond visual line of sight, because he says, I go to the top of the roof and then I drop it right here, but then when I drop it, I can't see the drone anymore. So I'm technically beyond visual line of sight, even though he's like right there. So he was asking a lot of questions about Part 108. I said, well, Part 108 wouldn't do much for you because it's fully autonomous. But with our proposal, it would work because you would be able to do that, locally.
That's cool, man. Greg, before I let you go, question of the podcast. So I typically ask this to all my guests to get idea of perspective based on the history in the industry. So what is one thing you wish you knew about the drone industry before choosing it as a career? And I guess in your instance it's a little different because you still do both, but from the drone side of it.
Oh, that's a good question. What do I wish? I wish I had kind of a time machine to see how quickly it would have grown. Because I think I would have spent even more time focusing on the drone side, even though we did spend a lot of time focusing on it. But yeah, if somebody had told me that we would have drones that can do what they do today in 8 years, 10 years, it's incredible. I love seeing the changes in aviation in general. Thinking of like 100 years ago, we barely had aircraft flying in the air. And then 100 years later, now we have jets that are flying for 14 hours that are carrying hundreds of people. Well, we're kind of there with the drone side. It's blown up. Yeah. And then now we see all these different applications. So I kind of wish that I hadn't known that. Now, as far as, on the business side of things, I don't know. I don't know that there is anything that would have prepared me for, if you had told me 10 years ago that today I'd be talking on a podcast as one of the person that's like trained the most drone pilots in the country, maybe even the world, I would have said you're crazy. And here we are. Yep. So it's been a wild ride, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next few years. It's going to be cool.
Nice one. Greg, where could people get in contact with you, check out the courses, sign up for the courses, get information, see you at any trade show that you'll be at?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, pilotinstitute.com is where, we have all the courses, free and paid. You can check out the YouTube channel. We have 2 of them, one for airplane and one for drones, 2 different types of content that we post over there. As always, I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to add me as a contact, I always look to connect with people on LinkedIn that do the same thing that I do and love drones and airplanes in general. And then trade shows, we're going to be at Commercial UAV again this year. We do we do a few airplane shows as well. So Sun and Fun is a big one in Lakeland, Florida in April. And then we do Oshkosh, which is in July in Wisconsin. That's the largest air show for general aviation in the world. It's massive. Wow. We're there for a whole week. And you can always find us at these events and then smaller events that we do left and right. But come say hi if you see us at the booth or anywhere. We always love talking to students or wannabe students or anybody else who's interested in this world.
Nice. Greg, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you. Anything else before I let you go?
No, I really appreciate the time, and I'm excited to be listening to this and seeing what people say.
Me too. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Reverdiau. Yes,
that was good.
On the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast. Thank you very much, man.
All right, see you later.
Take care.